Hello, everybody. My name is Pedro Regato, and I'm going to make a presentation about the FLR experience. It's a 12 years experience of FLR in the Shuf Biosphere Reserve in the mountains of Lebanon. The project is, the name of the project is Forest Landscape Restoration in the Shuf West Bekaa landscape, regaining landscape resilience, ecological functionality, and human well-being. Well, first of all, I will make a brief introduction of myself. I have a 35 years experience in the fields of forest landscape restoration, biodiversity and ecoregion conservation, natural resource management, integrated rural development, and climate change, mainly in the Mediterranean region, but also in West and Central Asia, Africa, and Latin America. My working experience is with research and academia institutions. With the private sector, international NGOs, I led the forest department at WWF and IUCN for the Mediterranean region. And more recently, I'm working as a freelance consultant for UN organizations, national and international NGOs, and governmental agencies. Now I will start the presentation giving some insights about the landscape. As I mentioned, the landscape is a mountainous landscape in the southern part of Mount Lebanon in Lebanon. It is the Shuf West Bekaa region. It has a altitudinal range between 900 and almost 2,000 meters above sea level. And the whole area is declared as a biosphere reserve. It started becoming a protected area in 1996 as a Shuf Cedars reserve in a smaller area. But once the area was declared biosphere reserve, it covered 50,000 hectares, becoming the largest protected area in the Mediterranean Middle East. Of course, as the biosphere reserve, it has 3 zones: the core area, mainly in the upper parts of the mountain, the buffer zone, and the development zone. And the landscape is managed by the Minister of Environment of Lebanon, who delegates the management to an organization called Ars El Shuf Cedar Society, with whom I work. A few features of the landscape. Well, as you all may know, the area belongs to the Mediterranean hotspot, which is one of the worldwide hotspots with higher levels of plant endemism. And the landscape itself includes a number of key biodiversity areas. Almost, a bit more than 25% of the remaining cedar forests in Lebanon, about 1,200 plant species, a number of key landscape fauna like the wolf, wildcat, hyena, and the recently reintroduced Nubian ibex. And the landscape is one of the key areas in the Eastern Mediterranean flyway, including a large number of migratory birds. In addition, the landscape has huge cultural values. It has an important local identity and cultural heritage, and traditional cultural practices are still pretty alive in the landscape in terms of the management and use of non-timber forest products, pastures, freshwater, and traditional agricultural terrace systems. The project has applied the following FLR principles. The project has focused on the entire landscape. It has addressed the root causes of landscape degradation. It has engaged all concerned actors and support participatory governance systems to implement FLR, forest landscape restoration. It has developed a common vision for restoring multiple functions and multiple benefits. It made important efforts to maintain and enhance natural ecosystems within the landscape. It has considered a wide range of implementation options with a cost-benefit view. It has done major investments in capacity building and knowledge generation, and also has applied a management, adaptive management approach for the long-term resilience of the landscape. Now I will look at briefly at what the project has done in each of these principles. I'll start with focusing on the entire landscape. The project has addressed the landscape analysis at two levels, the landscape level and the municipality level. At the landscape level, the project has gathered all the information, different layers in terms of different environmental, social, and economic features, and make an overlapping to identify values and problems related to landscape degradation and to the cultural and biodiversity values of the landscape. At the landscape level, I may mention that being a biosphere reserve, the project made a high emphasis on the delimitation of land tenure and regulations of land uses. This was a major aspect in order to reduce conflicts between development and nature protection. And well, I will mention this later on, but thanks to these efforts, the boundaries between the core area and the buffer zone and the development zone were better developed and agreed among the different stakeholders in order to make sure that land uses were in line with the need of protecting the biodiversity and cultural values of the landscape. Once we reached a map with the overlapping of the different layers in the landscape, we looked at the municipality level in more in depth. For this, we made use of Google Earth information to, in a very detailed, identify the different land use types at the municipal level, and for each land use type to define different levels of preservation, from very degraded, medium to well-preserved conditions for each land use type. This was fundamental for two reasons. First, because from the human point of view, we needed to look at, to create governance structures for FLR at the municipality level, and making this very in-depth analysis allow us to sit together with the different stakeholders in the municipality and look very carefully at the landscape pattern at the municipal level. So what was the mosaic, what were the problems, and how to address these problems under the umbrella of the overall FLR objectives for the whole landscape. The landscape analysis also incorporated the modeling of climate change impacts. This is because these impacts from climate change are very noticeable since a number of years. In fact, when we started forest restoration activities in the landscape 10 years ago, we realized that all the prescriptions about when to do field restoration activities, etc., how to do restoration, were not very much in line with the climate conditions of the landscape. And we needed to look at what has already changed in terms of climate change and what are the forecasts for the future in order to adapt the forest landscape restoration interventions. Well, very briefly, as in most areas worldwide, the temperature is projected to be increased by 3.2 degrees by the end of the century. Precipitation will decrease at least 11%. Snow will decrease significantly, like 40%. And the projections are that at the altitude of the higher parts of the Schuf-Westbecker landscape that currently is covered with huge snow quantities during winter, may not have snow cover by the end of the century. And this is a major problem because snow is the main contribution to water in this landscape. Then it is expected the increase of extreme weather events. It's already well known and observed that drought has increased. Summer drought is larger, covering a larger number of months and creating significant stress to vegetation and to human activities, and also modifying a lot the possibilities of doing field restoration activities. And heat waves is also an important feature, contributing to a number of important problems in the landscape, like forest dieback and forest fires. The landscape analysis looked also at the climate envelope model to predict changes in the species distributional range. It is important to mention that according to this climate envelope model, the Schuf-Westbecker landscape has the highest potential species richness by 2050 in Lebanon, which means is the area of Lebanon with highest probability of maintaining a high species diversity. But even though species will be very much affected, and in some cases they will need to be created at higher altitudes, those that are currently at the highest altitudes will see their distribution range very reduced or maybe disappearing. And other species outside from the landscape, from lower areas, may enter in the landscape due to climate change projections. Climate change will be extremely aggravated due to the maladaptive practices and land abandonment that is currently happening in the landscape. The project has addressed the root causes of landscape degradation, mainly because in order to define priority forest landscape restoration interventions, that address the interconnection between the threats and the drivers. So if we see that soil erosion or forest fires, a number of threats are related to maladaptive agricultural practices or the abandonment of agricultural practices, we need to look at what is happening in terms of human population in the area. So why intensification is promoting more pollution and bad uses of agricultural land, and why the population dynamics has abruptly changed due to outmigration and so on. And knowing that intermediate causes, look at what has happened in terms of political instability in the region, political problems, and economic problems that are behind the changes in the human population. In that way, the project has defined priority interventions directly to improve management practices in the field, but also to promote the economic evaluation of ecosystem services and the identification or the support of value chains that will push people to come back to the landscape and realize that in the landscape they can make an economic benefit, and at the same time looking at the policy changes and the market incentives that are needed in order to support this green value chain development. So in that way, the activities will not just focus on at one level, but at the different levels, and make sure that the integrated way of addressing different levels will ensure the long-term sustainability of the project. In terms of engaging stakeholders and supporting participatory governance, the project has established governance systems that demonstrate legitimacy, effectiveness, and efficiency. We established mainly two governance structures. The Alliance for the Green Sub-Biosphere Reserve, an informal institution including representatives of the different municipalities of the landscape, the central governmental level, Ministry of Environment, Agriculture, NGOs, private sector, and so on. And the aim of establishing this alliance was to provide focus around a common vision for the forest landscape restoration in the landscape, and to coordinate the actions to be implemented in the different landscape areas. Also to promote cooperation among municipalities, especially for those interventions that involve several municipalities, because are cross-cutting the boundaries of several municipalities. A more implementation governance system was the establishment of the municipal forest committees, which were smaller bodies made up of 10 to 20 members representing the municipality council, extension services, community organizations, women groups, NGOs, and local schools. And of course, even if it is not written in the slide, the organization that is managing the Biosphere Reserve, ACS, and the staff and all the experts that are supporting this organization. These municipal forest committees, the idea was to become credible basic structures with legitimacy and recognition from local stakeholders. So in a way that the local population in the municipality recognize that these committees are working for them, are consulting them, are involving them in their needs in the FLR planning activities at the municipal level. Also, the municipal forest committees made important efforts to develop action plans for FLR interventions at the municipal level, considering the objectives that were defined at the whole landscape level. And also an important role to catalyze the participation of the population in the municipality in the planning, implementation, and also the monitoring of the FLR activities. The project has, through participation under these governance structures, the project developed a common vision for restoring multiple functions for multiple benefits. The vision of the landscape in the Chuf-West-PK is the following: a highly diverse and functional landscape that is internationally recognized as the repository of a rich cultural heritage linked to its natural resources and emblematic species, especially the national symbol Cedrus libani. that sustains healthy ecosystems and viable populations of biological species resistant to environmental hazards, and whose restored ecosystem services meet the economic, cultural, and spiritual needs of the local communities. The vision is related to the FLR objectives for the Schuh-Westphal landscape, which are mainly 4 objectives. I apologize for the slide with the too detailed information. The objective for me is not, I mean, I will not go through all this information, but I think it was important for whoever will look at the presentation more in detail and wants to go into these details. Briefly, just to mention that there are 4 objectives, and for each objective, the project has defined results that look at the ecological resilience, the socioeconomic resilience, and the cultural resilience. Very briefly, the first objective is to enhance the ecosystem services provided by the Schuh-Westphal landscape through the setting and consolidation of best practices and ecosystems restoration, management and conservation that incorporates innovation and climate adaptation. The second objective is to empower institutional and grassroots actors in the Schuh-Westphal reserve landscape to sustainably manage, conserve, and restore natural and semi-natural ecosystems. The third objective is to promote green growth through economic diversification and the development of value chains for organic agriculture, livestock, and forest products based on the appeal of the local identity. And the fourth objective is to mainstream FLR best practices into policies and regulations concerning natural resources management and spatial planning through policy dialogue.